So resting on your back, just pay attention to how you're lying there, how you're allowing your weight to sink into the floor. And feel how you're breathing. And as you observe your breath coming in and out, sense the movement that's allowing that to happen. And notice, what places are you aware of? In your rib cage, or maybe we'll call it a rib basket, a bit more flexible. You sense movement of your sternum, of your upper ribs, your middle ribs and your lower ribs. And when you think of those ribs, do you just think of the front or the sides or the backs or the whole circular hoop, semicircular hoop of each rib? And do you have a sense that one side maybe expands a little more as you breathe in? Does one side sink a little bit more as you breathe out? What's your sense of the size, the volume, the width, the length, the breadth of this part of you, your rib cage? And how does that fit with the length of your whole torso? From the top of your head down to your pelvis. So now that you've had a nice little rest, can you come up to sitting? And can you sit in that asymmetrical way that we've done for a few lessons now, with your left leg back and your right leg in front, with your right foot near your left knee? And actually, I'd suggest that it's going to be easier for you if you sit sideways on your mats, but you can do it whatever way. But as the lesson goes on, it might make more sense because we're going to be spreading a bit sideways. And if you need some foam under your bottom, or if you need to use the table, find a way to adjust yourself. So in that configuration, can you have your right hand on the floor beside you and a little bit behind for support, and bring your left hand onto the top of your head, onto the crown of your head, very top of your head, so your elbows out to the side. And can you start to tilt your head a little bit right and a little bit left? And feel, how do you organise to do that? So your hand is light on your head, not pushing, not squashing, and you're not pulling on your head. So just have a sense of how much of you does that movement involve at the moment. Is that an action of your head and your neck only? Do you have a sense of something happening in your pelvis? Go slowly enough that you can follow the movement. This is the sort of lesson that you can overdo quite easily, so go slowly. And make sure that you're not turning your head, that you're going directly side to side. So your right ear is coming towards your right shoulder and your left ear is coming towards your left shoulder. Do you have a sense of movement in your ribs how much of your spine moves? And is there a response in your pelvis, in your hips at the moment? Okay. So then switch over. Bring your legs the other way. Put your left hand down for support. Bring your right hand onto the top of your head and feel how this is. Is there something different about the way you do it on this side compared to the other side? Is your supporting hand in the same place? What's the sense of movement through your trunk? How much bending happens in your ribs? Do you have a sense of folding on one side and opening on the other side? And is any movement happening in your pelvis? Does one hip go down and up a little bit? Okay. And then have a little rest on the floor, on your back. I'm not going to give you big rests because of time. So enjoy, make the most of your rest, let everything settle. And then come up again. So again, in side sitting with your left leg back, your right leg in front of you. And this time, can you lean on your elbow and your forearm on the right side? So you're going lower, and it's going to be out further. So your right foot is near your left knee. That's it. So your legs are exactly the same configuration as before, but now you're resting on your elbow and your forearm. Okay, this may be more demanding, so see how you go. Bring your left hand onto the top of your head again and do the same movement of tilting your head a little to the right and a little to the left. And what happens this time? We've changed the constraint, changed the shape that you make. So pay attention to your left hip, your left buttock, your left side of your pelvis, and see if there's any movement happening there. And you can actually bring your hand down, bring that left hand down to somewhere around your hip joint. You might find your greater trochanter, you might find the top of your iliac crest. Find something, some piece of your skeleton on the left side. And continue to tilt your head left and right, but can you use that hand to encourage a bit of movement in your pelvis? So as you tilt your head to the right, does your hip come up or down? As you tilt your head to the left, which way makes sense? And you could actually feel that movement of your pelvis, the movement of your left hip, your left buttock, could help your head to turn, to tilt. Sorry, not to turn, to tilt side to side. And feel the shape that makes through your trunk. Okay. All right. And then swing yourself around and try that on the other side. So this time your right leg is back, your left leg's forwards, your left foot is near your right knee. lean on your elbow and your forearm. And don't go too big. Don't drive it too big. Be subtle enough that you can sense the detail. So feel if there's movement in your right hip, your right buttock, as you move your head, or not. And then bring your right hand down to find a place on your pelvis. You've been exploring those skeletal landmarks. Can you find a place on your pelvis that you could lift a little and lower a little on the right side of your pelvis? And feel that that can help your head to tilt to the right and to the left. So when we have the powerful muscles of the pelvis joining in, what does that do to the movement of your head? Beautiful. Have a lie down again. Okay. So come up again and come into that side sitting on the first side that you did, whatever that is. Left leg back, right knee forwards. Is that how we did it? Yeah. It doesn't matter which way. Well, it does, because we're going to do something a bit tricky. And again, down on your forearm and your elbow. Okay. So now can you bring your free arm up into the air towards the ceiling? And can you take that arm, if we think that that's pointing towards 12 o'clock, okay? And 3 o'clock would be behind you, 6 would be down into the floor somewhere. Could you take your arm from 12 o'clock towards 3 o'clock behind you, in that direction behind you, and then back to the ceiling? Yeah? And if you watch your hand, does that make a difference? So look towards your hand as it's up to the ceiling, and then watch your hand as it goes back behind you. So it's going behind you. That's it. So now we're getting a rotation through your trunk. How do you allow your ribs to move, your spine to move? Now, you don't have to reach all the way to the 3, of course. It might be that you get to the 1 or to the 2. That's perfectly fine. But notice if you're holding your breath, and give yourself a rest whenever you feel like it. Because this is quite, physically demanding, really. Oh, everyone's bailing out, having a rest. So have a lie down. I shall be guided by you. It looks like it's rest time. So the image that you have of how flexible your trunk and your rib cage are really impacts on how you do these sorts of movements. So we can think, the terminology of a rib cage is a very very rigid, kind of static image. And sometimes we talk about a rib basket being something more flexible. And I think in this lesson, what worked for me was the image of a slinky, those long sort of springy toy things, because we're needing a lot of flexibility through here. And I was thinking about somebody I worked with quite a while ago whose image of the back of her rib cage was that it was solid bone, that her individual ribs just went around to the sides, and then at the back, just bone. So you can imagine how she moved. So come up again to the second side, the side we haven't done, which is, you're going to show me. Thank you, right leg back. And lean on your left forearm and elbow. And take your right arm up to the ceiling. And watch your hand, if you can, as it turns back a little into the space behind you, as far as it's happy to go. So you do not need to get all the way behind you, but see how does your arm and your shoulder, what happens in your clavicle, your shoulder blade, your upper ribs, how can they be flexible enough to allow your arm to go back? And how can your pelvis contribute? What happens in your hips to let that happen too? Now, the next time your arm is back behind you, leave it there. Just leave it there for a moment. And just turn your head a little away from your arm. No. Don't just do what you know, do what the instructions are. So just turn your head and your eyes a little away from your arm. Yep, your knee can lift a little. Yep, totally fine. In fact, if it's not lifting a little, let it do that. Just turning your head a little away from your hand and then back towards it a little bit. So you're looking away from your hand, you're looking towards it again, just enough to remind your neck muscles that they do not need to hold. That's it. And then let your arm come down for a brief rest. Take it up again. Oh, just one before you have a rest. And take it back again and just see if that feels any different. Does it go back any more easily? Does it feel any freer in your neck and your shoulder and your chest? And then everybody lie down. And enjoy the space of resting on your back. Feel how you can breathe. And see if that image of your chest and your spine and your trunk is changing at all. Okay, up again. Side sitting, left leg back, right leg forwards. And again, resting on your right elbow, forearm. And you can bring your right, if you can bring your right foot in a little closer to your thigh, a little, so that your hip joint's even more bent on the right, do that. So this time, can you look towards the ceiling? So you can take your head back towards the ceiling and bring your left hand behind your head to support it. Now, so that the back of your skull rests into your hand, looking a bit towards the ceiling. Now, use your hand to help you to lift your head and bring it in a line towards your left knee, to look towards your left knee. So it's a twisty, bendy, foldy movement. How's that for specific? It's actually a little bit like flexion. It's a folding at the front. Slow it down, slow it down. You're on your forearm and your elbow. So you're resting on your forearm and your elbow. The weight of your head's resting in your hand. You look towards the ceiling. You look towards your left knee. And then you go back to the ceiling. So how can you do this in a way that's still comfortable, that you can still breathe, and that your pelvis might still be involved? If one knee could lift a little bit from the ground to help you do this, which one would it be? As you look towards your left knee, maybe that could lift a little. And then as you look up to the ceiling, it could come down. Try that out. Okay. Oh, and then swing around and try the same thing on the other side. And just notice whether there's a consistency in one side being a little bit easier than the other. And maybe that's got something to do with the way that you support yourself on through your resting arm, your supporting arm. So see if you can find a place where you're not sinking into that arm, that your shoulder is supporting you enough without grabbing and holding. So we have your head towards the ceiling, your hand supporting the weight of your head, and you're going to look a little towards the ceiling and then a little down towards your right knee, and finding that your knee can lift a little. What's the connection? As you look up, it's this opening, lengthening, extending through the right side. As you look down towards your right knee, it's a folding at the front and at the right, opening on the left. How are your slinky spines going? Are you still breathing? Maybe gritting your teeth and let it all go. Let it all go. How many shapes can we make with our trunk? Rest. There's a lot going on in this lesson. So after each one, we want to feel that, what is it? The afterglow, the after effect. See what did that particular configuration do? And you can see this is one of those lessons that really is like a movement puzzle. We keep changing the constraints so that we require your spine and your ribs and your shoulders and your hips and your pelvis to come up with solutions to this request to do a particular movement. So how can you find maybe a different movement or a different connection that helps you to solve the puzzle that's being presented to you? Okay, up again for the next variation. Up to side sitting, left leg back, right leg forwards. Leaning on your right forearm and elbow. And of course, if this is all a bit too much, just lie on the floor and imagine it. You don't have to do every part of every ATM, remember. So this time, bring your left arm towards the ceiling and then bend your elbows so that your hand can come to hold your chin somehow. Now, it could be that you could get your arm all around behind your head to your chin, but that may be a bit of a struggle, and so this will also work if you just hold your chin in the front. However you can manage it. All right, and now can you take your elbow backwards into that space behind you, follow it with your eyes, and then return. This is the sort of like a wrestling match between you and yourself. So, what can help you? Once you tie yourself up like this, where do you get a bit of help from? Can your pelvis do something? Yeah. Now, your knees do not have to stay anchored to the floor. Sorry, I've lost my mind. So as you go back, perhaps your knees could lift a little bit. Does that make sense? So you're turning, making a spiral through your trunk, and perhaps your knees could lift a little and then come down again. Can you still breathe in this headlock? Can you have a soft jaw, soft eyes? Feel how that spiral of movement comes from your head, through your trunk, through your ribs, your whole spine, into your pelvis, into your hips, into your legs, so that the turning at the head allows your knees to lift. Or maybe you could lift your knees and that could help you to turn your head. Okay, have a rest. I'm going to give you a rest before you do that on the other side. And as you're resting, you might be able to imagine that on the other side. You've already done it one side. So how could you, in your imagination, find a way for this to be a little more elegant, a little less effortful? So when you're resting, notice what parts of you, what places are thanking you for the rest. And maybe that could suggest to you that something's overworking a bit and you could change that the next time. So if you're ready to do a little bit more, come up into side sitting the other way and see if you can find a way to do this simply without efforting in your head and your neck and your shoulder. So you're leaning on your elbow and your forearm again. Your arm goes up towards the ceiling, so your elbow's towards the ceiling, and bring your hand either behind your neck, behind your head, towards your jaw and your chin to hold yourself there, or you can bring it to your chin in the front, as long as your elbow's up. And as your elbow turns into the space behind you and you follow it with your eyes, let your knees lift so that it's not just something that happens in your neck. So your pelvis is helping you. So your right hip goes down a little towards the floor. Your knees lift a little. The spiral of movement comes through your whole trunk. And you breathe. And your slinky torso allows you to move in that soft way so that your right hip comes towards the floor behind you. That's it. And then up again as your head turns up again. That's it. And breathing, soft, soft, and let it go. Rest on your back again. Ooh, how's your breathing going now? How do you sense the shape and the volume of your chest and your abdomen? Okay, you ready for another little piece of the puzzle? So come up again, side sitting, left leg back, right leg forwards. This time, could you rest on your left hand? Find a place that your left hand can be that would support you, not your right hand. So just see how whereabouts could you find a place for your left hand to be? And can you bring your right hand onto the top of your head, your elbow out to the side, and softly tilt your head side to side so that it's this time. Did I say, yes, so right, what did I say? So your left leg's back and your right leg's forwards, yes? And then your left hand is, oh yes, your left hand is down on the floor. So it's the opposite to what we usually do. Yes, left hand on the floor, right hand on the top of your head. Yeah? And that's why people are getting a bit confused, because it's not what we normally do. Switch hands. If you can, switch hands. No, switch hands. That hand's on the floor, this hand's on your head. Oh, it's your legs. That's why you're confusing. Switch your legs around. That's it. This hand on the floor, this hand on your head. Yes! Okay, this is not what we've been doing. And so, of course, this is another constraint that will ask something new from you. So go very softly and slowly to find, how do you find the flexibility in your rib cage, your rib basket, your slinky ribs, your slinky spine? What happens in your pelvis that allows that? Are your knees stuck on the floor, or is there something they can do to help? If you can't reach the floor with your hand, reach your ankle or your leg somewhere. And breathe. That would be my major piece of advice. Okay, let it go. Swing around the other way. So now you've got your right leg back, your left leg forwards. You're leaning on your right hand and your left hand is on the top of your head, lightly. And as you move your head a little to the right and a little to the left, feel how much give you can find, especially in your upper ribs. Around that, you might have a sense of that place moving that we were talking about before around the necklace. And how can your pelvis help you here? Does one buttock lift a little and lower again? Are we still, are you feeling like this is a movement of your whole trunk now rather than just your head and your neck? Okay, lie down and rest. We've only got one more bit and we're nearly in time. So, enjoy a bit of space and a bit of rest. Think of all the shapes that you've made through your trunk. And all the ways in this lesson that have been set up to find new directions of movement. And has that made any difference to the way you sense yourself as you lie on the floor? And come up for one last exploration into side sitting with your left leg back and your right leg forwards. And this time resting on your right hand, which is the first thing we did. With your left hand on the top of your head, softly and lightly. And tilt your head a little to one side and a little to the other side. And just observe in yourself if there's a different image of that movement, if it feels any easier, if there's more of you involved. What's the connection now between your head and your pelvis? Is your left hip in your image of this movement? Are you breathing? And then let that go. Do the same thing to the other side. Leaning on your right hand now with your left hand on your head. And softly tilting your head to the right and to the left. And feeling that, well, how much of you joins in. Sense the shape that you make, or the shapes, the changing shape that's happening. So it's tilting, not a turning, just tilting your head Right ear to the right shoulder, left ear to the left shoulder. Right hip joint will lift and lower a little as you do this. Softly, lightly, lovely. And let it go. Have one last rest. Lie down. Sense yourself on the floor. Observe the movement of your breathing. And notice all the places that you might be aware of. Your sternum, at the front, your ribs at the front and the sides and the back, your abdomen at the front and the sides and the back. Feel how your pelvis is resting there, how your shoulders come to rest. And what's the sense of the volume, the space inside you? And so when you're ready, can you roll to the side and bring yourself up to standing and observe as you do that, what shape do you make in your trunk? As you roll, as you come up, how much of you is part of that action? And come up and stand. And just observe for a moment whether anything feels different for you. Is anything new or fresh or unusual? You feel heavier or lighter? More connected, less connected? How are you breathing? And then could you start to walk? And what do you notice here in this action? What's the relationship between your pelvis and your chest and your shoulders? What shapes are you making through your trunk? How easy is it to swing your legs through and to swing your arms? Does your head feel heavy on the top or light? And then you can start to speed up a little bit, find your normal walking pace. And you could continue to walk all the way out the door.